you can't let someone go or tell them there's failing if you haven't told them what good looks like for you. And I think it's easy to get right and so easy to get wrong.
You've scaled your business to about 37 people, just consistently increased GP, 20% growth, and then 33% growth year on year.
Surround yourself with people that are better than you and be acceptant of that. Know what your strengths are and supplement that with people that have stronger skills in their areas. I was in a very helpless position a lot of my life, and this was me breaking the cycle to say it's not going to happen anymore. By putting ourselves in the middle of these events, we go network, we talk to them, offering them an invite rather than asking for work. Actually, we haven't got up for a while, let's grab a coffee. You grab a coffee and then what are your hiring plans? That all comes out. You're giving them something rather than asking for something. When you give them something, they obviously want to give you something back. We pick up a lot of work just through those kind of conversations.
What was that evolution like for you? Like, at what points did you invest in having those resources in order to be able to scale faster? You've got an incredible story and have achieved a lot in the recruiting industry. So absolutely, I'm looking forward to learning from you and sharing that journey with our audience. So what would I need to know about your childhood and growing up that would help me to understand the person that you are today?
Okay, we're going to go deep straight away then, I imagine. I think probably easiest way to define it is I had a pretty difficult childhood, if I'm honest with you. And I talk very openly about it, and I can tell you why I talk openly about it later on. But I grew up in a very violent household where I was seeing things a child shouldn't see. It wasn't towards me, but it's directed towards my mother. And sadly, that adversely influenced who I was for a fairly large part of my life, 35 years. I can expand on that if you wish.
I mean, that sounds very difficult, Sachin. I appreciate you sharing that. You said that affected you for a long time, like 35 years. Can you elaborate on that?
Of course, yeah. So, I mean, a child seeing what he probably shouldn't see at that age, from your age, 2, 3, as soon as your earliest memories begin, through to probably age 18. I was, as I said, not personally experiencing it, but saw my mother on a sort of every few days. It was on edge, as to what might happen. It was alcohol fueled. It's sadly ingrained within our culture, an Indian culture, which I think is being stamped out in Western society. I'm delighted to say. I think my father would have seen it from his father in terms of what was acceptable, and ultimately, it caused me to, in some ways, grow up very quickly, but also I think live my life in fear, really, of what might happen to my mum, who was the closest person in the world to me, especially, in those days. So, it was difficult. That manifested itself into sort of what I later learned were behaviors that weren't conducive with the way that I suppose I wanted to be presented, if that makes sense. And I was, I think there was a constant need to be liked by people, maybe feeling that I hadn't been so much before. My earlier years. An interesting one is my ability to regulate, and I've kind of done quite a lot of personal work on this. What normal, what usually people would grow up to be able to do is for food or whatever it might be, you regulate. You have, I don't know, 1 or 2 of something indulgent versus having a lot of it. And I think my mum's only gift to me that she could give in that kind of pretty tough household was food, and it was given freely. And I think as a result, over the years, I kind of developed a fairly unhealthy relationship with food, because she would say, do you have this? Do you want some more? Do you want some more? And I had no visibility of what good looked like in that regard. So it was somewhat challenging to regulate, and that followed me through my life as well. So certain behaviors, certain behaviors that were kind of pretty tough, I think, on others as well. I wasn't taught to behave in a way that would be acceptable to society. So I was always the loudest. I didn't have a lot of control over behaviors with others. And so in my early years, it then meant that I wasn't very well liked by a lot of people. So I kind of grew up to the age of about 16, 17 with very few friends. It was a pretty tough few years.
That sounds very tough. How did you work through that then, Sachin? Because obviously I would have never guessed that you had that, those challenges growing up from our interactions. So obviously there's been some kind of a personal transformation that you've gone through over the years. What What did that involve?
Yeah, you know what? I think there's a couple of things. I think age 16, 17, it kind of, as I was growing up, it clicked to actually, if I didn't change my behaviors, I became a bit more self-aware. Still not fully, but a bit more self-aware. I think if I didn't change my behaviors, then that would ultimately culminate in, continuing to live a life where, you're not sure whether you've got friends, and it's quite a lonely life. And so that clicked. And I think whilst I still behaved in a certain way, I managed to adapt a little bit, and I suppose behaved in a way that's more desirable or being acceptable around society and around people. Not needing to be the loudest person in the room as much, or have my say always, and that kind of thing. And I think that helped shape me a little bit. I also, and this is a pretty dark place to go, I think, but again, if we haven't been dark already, but I then, when I was 18, there was an incident where it was a warm summer's day. I suppose I'd come back from university. Our little routine at home would be, we'd get a DVD in those days, we'd get a takeaway. And I remember turning up, drove back to the house, and my father came out with his fist clenched saying, "That time you told me to, I don't know, F off or something." And I just went straight defensive. And I sort of said, "Look, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm really sorry," or whatever I've done. And my mum came out kind of with quite disheveled hair, and clearly the next words I heard were, Sachin, he hit me. And I don't know what it was, but it was 15 years of anger, helplessness, and whatever else you might want to call it came out. And I just went for him, and I won't give too much detail, but let's just say if I hadn't been pulled off of him, my life might have been shaped slightly differently. But I tell you this because I think, having had conversations with my therapist, I'll come on to later, I think that might have broken the cycle in some regards. It broke some of that kind of the fear of him, and always, feeling that I was the kind of, not the victim, but I was kind of being in a very helpless position a lot of my life to that date. And this was me breaking the cycle to say it's not going to happen anymore. And lo and behold, after that incident, it didn't happen again. And I suppose it gave me a bit more confidence and a bit more happiness, knowing that was putting him in his place. And so, I said we've gone dark quickly, so I'm sorry for that. But
no, don't apologize. I mean, I wasn't quite expecting that, but it's important and needs to be talked about. So, then I met my wife. Those are just the sort of this. Sorry, if you want to talk about, we're happy to do that. But I suppose moving that element of my life on a little bit. Yeah.
That from that point on, I for some reason, something clicked in my head, and I started generally improving my behavior. There were still elements of it that I probably would have, in hindsight, liked to have changed. But I was very blessed that I met my now wife when I was 24. So we've been together 21 years. And she was an amazing influence on me. And what will hopefully resonate throughout this conversation is my family. And again, we'll talk about that later. But she helped shape me a lot, as people who are important in your life do. And that was great. Fast forward, business I'm sure will come later, but set the business up when I was 31, just a year after we got married. And I appointed a chairman, non-exec and a chairman, who about 5 years ago, he'd been working with me for a couple of years, and he said, "Look, there's certain things that you do, and the desire to be liked, and just certain behaviors, which I think would really do with having something called psychodynamic counseling," which incidentally, following your suggestion around Stephen Bartlett's question, is around, well, why you behave the way you behave today as a result of who you were in your early years. And so I had 2 years with a therapist about 4 years ago, and it was game changing. It was one of the most amazing things I ever did in hindsight, because it really helped me to understand why I was behaving a certain way. And then once you know why you're behaving, you become more self-aware, and you can adapt behaviors accordingly. And from that, I became a better husband, a better father, a better friend, a better son. And actually I became more forgiving and also understanding why my mother behaved in a certain way. That was, it helped me realize, albeit 30 years on, it helped me realize, kind of that actually nothing was my fault. It was, I was just in that situation, which was unfortunate. But I could change the behaviors going forward to be happier. And I did.
Wow, that's powerful, Sachin. I mean, recruitment is a very people business, right? It is very geared towards, not saying you can't be sort of more introverted and be successful at it, but it is geared towards someone who has an outgoing personality, excellent interpersonal skills, high EQ, these kinds of things. How did you get into recruitment, and how did, and you've obviously been very, very successful at it, how did that shift happen so that you were able to bring out the best, the best performance in yourself?
That's a good question. I think in some regards, you're talking about what do I need to say about your childhood. One thing it did help me is, and we know recruitment is one of the biggest traits, and it's a buzzword people use, but resilience. You can imagine I'm here today and having gone through a fair bit. That helped me to become very resilient. I was always reasonably confident despite the upbringing. I think I needed to shout the loudest and be heard. And I think that these are all, if we're looking at what good looks like in terms of recruitment, I'm not saying everyone has to be these things, but I think they're big contributors. They're resilient, confident. I always was able to speak to people. I think that developed almost that having to try harder. And it kind of, in my early 20s at university, became reasonably popular and had a really good group of friends. And I was just very blessed that actually I started meeting people from different walks of life, different socioeconomic status, and all of that influenced who I became. And I think I got to learn to talk to people when I was working in a bar or in a pub versus, talking to, I don't know, my friends' parents who'd done extremely well, and and be able to adapt my who I was. So again, just learning to talk to people well. I knew I was good at speaking by my early to mid 20s, and I was offered a sales job through a company called Pareto Law, and
I know them.
Good business, and I went through an assessment day. They said, "Look, here you've passed," and there was someone there that saw you and wants you to work within it was an IT sales role in about a place that was an hour away from my house. And I said, I didn't know anything different. So I was like, yeah, I'll go and see them. And had the meeting. They said I'd got the job. They then called me. I'd handed my notice in at the bank I was working in. I was post-university, 6 months post-university. I was working in a bank where I'd worked for about 4 or 5 years. And they then said, I got a phone call to say, I had my notice in. They called me and said, Sachin, your start date has been pushed back by 6 weeks. And so are you going to pay me for that? And they said, no, we'll pay for a week. I said, okay, well, what am I meant to do? So we'll go and find a temp job. So I went to my local high street Reed employment business. Yep. And we went there. I went there and ultimately they said, we haven't got any temp jobs, but how do you fancy recruitment? And so, I like a lot of people do, fall into recruitment. And then I kind of enjoyed it. Reed gave me fantastic training. I moved quite quickly into Reed accountancy, but I was only there in total for about 11 months. I learned early on that I didn't want to be part of a corporate, which, no disrespect to Reed, because it's a brilliant business and foundations training and everything else fantastic. But I ended up falling into recruitment and not looking back.
That's hilarious. Oh, cool. So, funnily enough, one of my mentors, Sachin, was the managing director of Reed for years. His name's Romney Ross. He's now retired, but he had a big positive influence on my business journey. Just to round the circle, I know that you're a big advocate of mental health and recruitment. Can you just speak a little to that and what that looks like, what initiatives you are involved in, and why you think that's important?
Yeah, I think having been on the journey I'd been on, and I think, as I said, thanks to my then chairman who had highlighted this need, and I suppose I didn't know what I didn't know, and I think the whole awareness piece was, and it still is, right? It's a stigma. There's a stigma associated with particularly men looking after their mental health, and one of the blessings I had, I didn't mention this earlier, but being so close to my mum, I'm quite effeminate, very, very comfortable with everything, and anything that others might find awkward for me, we're very open with our children, for example, and everything is really, really open in the way that we talk with our kids and teach them. There's very little taboo, whereas in my childhood there was. I think all of this then culminated in having been on my own journey. And I don't want to be a preacher about it, but I think people, especially given how fast paced and how hard the role of a recruiter is, the hours we work, the mental strain, having to navigate the conversations with candidates and clients, having to sort of stick to targets and supersede them, and sometimes not do so. Or if you're leading a team, having to have difficult conversations consistently, all of that I think recruitment is particularly notorious for
stress,
for affecting people's mental health. Yeah. And I think for me, I'm not involved formally in initiative, but I talk very openly in conversations like this that are for wider sort of consumption, but also with my friends and family. And I've encouraged a few people in my network just to go and to talk to someone if I know they've been through some sort of adversity, and I sort of sell the benefit of that. So I'm a really powerful advocate just because I believe in it so much. I've referred my own therapist to a couple of people
Amazing.
as well. So I actually stopped working with her about 2 years ago. I joke and say I broke up with her because I feel in a better place, and I've not felt the need to go back. But I do try and keep my mental health in check in a number of ways, and I can talk about that later if you're interested.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I don't know who needed to hear that today, but I'm sure it's already had a positive influence. As a recruiter, sourcing can quickly feel like your full-time job. You've got a rec, you've got a deadline, and you're spending hours just trying to find people who might be a fit, scrolling LinkedIn, tweaking Boolean strings, sending 40 messages to get 3 replies. That's what Juicebox was designed to fix. Juicebox is an AI recruiting platform that actually understands what you're looking for. You describe who you're looking for in plain English. Juicebox surfaces candidates across 800 million profiles from LinkedIn, GitHub, and more. No Boolean, no manual filtering. Juicebox also personalizes outreach for each candidate automatically. It pulls in context from their past experience and even flags mutual connections. You can send hundreds of personalized outreach at scale weekly. By automating the manual parts of your job, you free up time to focus on making the recruiting process feel more human. In our recruiter community, our members are constantly discussing tools, and Juicebox is one that frequently gets recommended. You can try it for free today at juicebox.ai and use coupon code recruitmentcoach15 to get 15% off your first annual plan. That's juicebox.ai, and remember to use the code recruitmentcoach15. Let's talk about scaling, because you've scaled your business to about 37 people, I think. And the other thing you've achieved is just consistently increased GP. The last couple of years has been 20% growth and then 33% growth year on year, which, and especially, let's say last year, a lot of the industry has been flat. So you've kind of bucked the trend there. Actually, before I ask you questions about scaling, let me just give some context here. So you've got 2 very different verticals. You've got the recruitment vertical, where you place, or your team places, non-sales and back office roles within recruitment companies. And then I think you also have a technology recruitment business. Did I get that right? And why two different verticals?
Yeah, so I'll give you the short story because I'm very passionate about what we do. But the short story is that 2012, we launched Camino Partners, myself and two others, ex-colleagues. And the focal point was, rightly, as you described, so accountancy and finance roles initially, and then all the other, we don't like the words back office because that seems to suggest they're at the back. So we use mission control roles. So mission control, I like it. Non-fee earners, central support, central services people into the recruitment sector. And our mission was to improve the people perception and performance of the sector. And so we've worked hard by being good to people, but delivering on mandates. And I think so we've gone some way if you fast forward in 13, 14 years to achieving that. You know, we're very blessed. We've got a strong network in that area. The only challenge is that it's not very scalable. You might love me and run a recruitment business of 50 people, but you might need me once a year. Whereas if I was recruiting recruiters, which we've deliberately steered away from of late, then there'd be an opportunity to work with me all the time. So first and foremost, the second division, I can talk about the journey later on, but that we now have is a business called Camino Search. So the first one's Camino Partners, and it's Camino Search. So Camino Search was a brainchild of an ex-colleague of mine who came to me 6 years ago to say, look, Sachin, I think we can do more here. He had a friend who worked in private equity, and that was going to give us an opportunity or be a conduit to us to that world. And the niche that was carved out was effectively placing CFOs, C-1, C-2 into private equity-backed tech-enabled and business services companies. Bit of a mouthful, but effectively servicing the private capital ecosystem. And it was his brainchild, and that's effectively we've grown our verticals, so we still service that world, but we've also we operate within the M&A, corporate development, origination space as well, so placing those people into the private equity space as well. So the two key verticals that we operate in, and both interim and perm.
Okay, interesting. I was going to ask what the service line was at permanent and interim. So it sounds like the functional area is all within finance and accounting, but it's just where you place those people. Initially, it was within recruiting businesses, and latterly, it's within PE-backed tech companies. So that all is making sense. The other question I had is, you've got offices in London and Tampa. Why Tampa, out of interest?
Yeah, you know what? There's a number of reasons, but Tampa for us, it is unsaturated. It has a very good school population, university population, where we've can access talent, and a lot of our model historically anyway was hiring rookies and developing trainees and developing them. And actually, every single person, save one in our office, there's 6 of them there now. 5 of them have come through the Camino Academy, which is I'm really proud to say.
Oh, awesome.
So that was one reason. And then another, it's tax friendly for the employee, particularly, and reasonable for the employer, much better than other places like New York, for example. And look, let's not be around the bush. The weather is gorgeous
Sure.
there. It's very, very hot. I actually say to my wife and to others when we talk about Tampa that if I had my time again, then my kids were a little bit younger, then I would have tried to persuade my family to be over there for some time, because it's just a wonderful place to operate, to live, and I imagine to work. And I try and get over there as frequently as I can, because it's just a great place. But we set that office up. This same colleague who helped launch the Camino Search brand went over to the US in March 24 and launched the division with 2 others. There's only one of the original 3 remaining there, and then the other 5 have been people that we've sort of brought up in recruitment, and we've got another person joining next week as well.
Fantastic. So I don't think you know this, but I held an annual conference in St. Pete for the last 2 years, and we actually asked, I asked everyone on LinkedIn, where should we host our conference, and quite a few people said Tampa, St. Pete area. So that's what we end up choosing. It was a great spot, really beautiful. And then I recorded it.
Lovely.
Yeah. It was awesome. We're actually going to Dallas this year for a change. But so here's my question then, Sachin, is imagine you're mentoring a recruitment founder who wants to scale their business. What are the top kind of 2 or 3 lessons that you learned from your journey that would inform your advice to, either things they should absolutely focus on and put an energy into, or anything to not to do?
First and foremost, surround yourself with people that are better than you, and be acceptant of that. Know what your strengths are and supplement that with people that have stronger skills in their areas. And that's been fantastic. I've had for us, I've managed to bring in some brilliant people, and you're very complimentary earlier, saying that I've scaled the business and I've done this, but honestly, it's the people that I've had, including my ex-colleague I was referring to, others that work with me. I've been very blessed to surround myself also with, and again, this is something I strongly encourage in terms of betterment for oneself. Mentors, non-execs, people that have been there and done it. So learn from people that are in the know and been on a journey. So that's definitely another point. I think also on a granular level, just giving people an understanding of what their expectations are. We failed at this early on. It might sound quite basic, but it really isn't. It's something that it's easy to get right and so easy to get wrong. So you can't let someone go or tell them there's failing if you haven't told them what good looks like for you. And I think in the early years, it wasn't really a yardstick. It was just, that doesn't feel right, not working out. Whereas I think the minute we started putting some more structure in place, and that's my next point, people had visibility of what they needed to do, to get their next step up, or to hit their targets, or to acquire a certain client. Just having visibility of what was needed of them by their leader and the board ultimately. And I think then the next one would be sort of systems, structure, process, all of those together. I think making sure, and I'm trying to avoid using AI too much, especially given I'm not an advocate of it, and I can't preach about it, but foolish to say, one should be now if they're adopting sort of AI practice. I wouldn't say look at venturing into territories unknown to our sector, but the note takers using an LLM, chat or whatever it might be, using tech to its best capability, having an amazing CRM in place from day one that adopts AI capabilities when it comes to, I don't know, whether it's note taking or CV sourcing, or the ability to find your candidates. So yeah, embracing tech. Process and systems, I think process and structure, having visibility of, again, what good looks like, and giving people the sort of blueprint, the visibility of what they need to be successful in your world. I think all those are just a few points, and I'm sorry I've gone on a little bit there, but hopefully
No, that's good. We can dig into each of these. So three things you mentioned, basically, or three buckets: hiring, setting expectations, and then like systems and process, right? So when it comes, I'd like to start with setting clear expectations. Like, how does that work within your businesses, Camino Search, Camino Partners? Like, how do you, what are the sort of most important KPIs or expectations, and how are those communicated? How are those managed?
Yeah, I think we're getting better at it. And I think, it's our business isn't, whilst I was brought up in the old world of recruitment where, just pick up the phone is the most sensible option. I think that still stands. There are other ways, and you can warm up the call, obviously, in advance now, more than we could in those days. But I think that's a really important, it's really important for us to be unafraid to, pick up the phone and make those calls. When it comes to visibility, we have quite a blend of metrics, but it's not a KPI driven environment in our business. And I'm trying to instill more rigor. I brought in a UK and Europe MD recently called Darren Burns. He's a great guy, and he's come from a more corporate background, so he's definitely instilling more rigor. But I think in terms of not failing, visibility of at this level, when you're a trainee, these are things you need to do. And this is what good looks like. You're not necessarily going to be making lots of fees, but if you do these things, this will line you up to make fees in the near future. And then at each step, we've got the Camino pathway, which Camino actually means the way, the path, the road in Spanish. So Camino pathway is what we call it, promo pathway, and it just gives people visibility of what they need to do to get to each level, both by way of inputs to an extent, not granular in terms of you've got to make 10 calls, but there's achievements that needed to take place for the milestones that need to be hit. What good looks like at that level in terms of what that next role will look like, the benefits associated with that. And then, obviously what you've got to do to get there. So that gives people very clear visibility, whichever path they're following. And it's a bit complex, our scheme. I think we are looking at refining it a bit, but if you're going to go down the leader route, there's options there on interim and perm, Camino Partners and Camino Search. There's options if you want to go down the biller route and become an executive consultant and a longer term sales director potentially without any specific leadership oversight. So there's visibility is the key thing. So just those are the kind of things that we'd look at. But everyone has visibility of what they need to do to get to the next step. And then it's holding people to account. If you haven't done this, why not? What do we need to do to help you? It's very, very much a collaborative environment in our business, and everyone preaches about that. But if you walk into our office, you'll see that. As I was leaving the office just now to come down to this meeting, to this conversation, I just heard the interim team had put together a game they were playing around, kind of in a competition. They'd put in around points for this, points for that during their BD sprint. So just instilling and encouraging behaviors like that just contribute to not only high performance, but also a fantastic culture.
Love that. That's really cool. Look, there's so many. This is the challenge with these. What I find most difficult navigating these conversations, Sachin, is there's so many directions we could go and so many things we could unpack. But what I'd want to make sure we have a good amount of time to discuss is your community-led business development strategy, because that's something I think which is very innovative, and I'd love to learn more about. So let's shift gears and kind of dig into that a little bit. Could you first of all explain what it is and what it involves?
Yeah, I think, look, in a line without sounding too cheesy, so the art of selling without selling, right? It gives you the opportunity to do that. And I think, immersing yourself within the center of your network is so powerful. And, rather than, we looked about shouting the loudest earlier and me doing that when I was younger, but it isn't about that anymore. Where a recruiter does this, and this, and you preach on LinkedIn about how great you are or whatever else. And everyone's got the sales manuals and everything else. I don't think we're doing anything crazily innovative, but I do think that we're doing the kind of community building really well. And we give our recruiters, our colleagues, the ability to talk to their clients, their prospects, and we equip them with tools and conversation points that aren't, giz a job, picking up the phone to, have you got any work for me? We just don't do that. And so, it's insight led. So from a community standpoint, that's one thing. I'll talk about the insight led piece. There's two areas there, if I may. Yep. The community piece. So, we've got events within our recruitment market. So within the Camino Partners one, which we've become, strong word, but famous for, and people want to come to the events. The partners that support it want to support them. And the reason for that is that we get, my kind of vision for these events is getting the highest quality concentration of person, whatever that might be in that event, together. And there's very little selling. We introduce them to each other. So it's peer-to-peer networking. We've got an event next Thursday, for example, in the city in London, which is very informal. There's about 40 recruitment business leaders of 25 to 200 person recruiters. And we just bring them together. I'll say about 3 or 4, 2-3 minutes worth of thank yous, and the rest of it, very little selling going on. But by putting ourselves in the middle of these events, we go network, we talk to them. But the people that can't come to the events, just offering them an invite rather than asking for work. We haven't caught up for a while, let's grab a coffee. You grab a coffee, and then what are your hiring plans? That all comes out. And we pick up a lot of work just through those kind of conversations. So kind of events we'll run. We do CFO dinners, FD dinners, where they'll be a bit more structured, where we'll have a guest speaker, maybe talking about M&A or the CFO's relationship with the CEO during a deal. Amazing speakers. Our non-exec Tara, who's amazing, by the way, it was facilitated the last one that we did. We've had some great people doing those ones. We have marketing events, really cool, and targeting that market as well. Kind of a matrix themed, kind of decoding the, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a brilliant, we had red and blue pills and everything. It's really, really clever. I should point out there were sweets. But a very, very cool kind of themed event for the marketing world. We've run compliance, legal events where there's something particularly interesting happening, a change of legislation or whatever. Then we bring contracts, compliance, legal people within our recruitment demographic. We do events globally. So we've done Sweden, we've had a CFO dinner there. We've had New York, or we've had CEOs, CFOs turning up to a networking event with a panel. We do really cool destinations. So we had a dinner at Chinatown in Dorchester. So I don't skimp on these. I'm very blessed that I have great partners to support them, but very little selling. We're immerse ourselves in the middle of those communities, and we run an event. Given our size, we run an event every sort of probably 1 to 2 each month. So that's that element. And if you want to learn, I can tell you a bit more about the insight-led selling, which is what we're very proud of on the marketing side.
Yeah, I'd love to. But before we talk about insight-based selling, first of all, I believe that community is one of the biggest marketing opportunities that is underutilized, especially in recruitment. And I think it can be a moat, like in the world of AI where there's low trust, right? And there's a lot of just spam and slop out there. How do you really differentiate from others, and how do you protect your relationships and your brand against erosion from, let's say a more AI-led recruitment model? I think having those events and connecting in person, like you can't fake that, right? You can create AI videos which look almost like real, like you can barely tell the difference, but meeting people in person is something that is only can be done by humans, right? So I think I think that's such a smart strategy. In terms of I'm assuming you didn't start out doing 1 or 2 events per month straight out of the gate. So like, what was the progression of that? Like, you now obviously have built quite a sophisticated machine to run these events, and you've got a lot of experience at it. But if you were advising someone who wanted to get started, then what would your advice be there?
I think it's in basic terms, asking what do your clients want, depending on the market that you're operating. What do I want to hear? Actually, there's another reason to speak to your clients. So what would you like to hear, Miss Client, or whom would you like to meet? Who would you like to see speak? What innovations are you interested in? We could get someone in that field to come and talk about. So ask them. And again, within that conversation, you have an opportunity to talk about something that's not recruitment, right? And then the natural segue will ultimately end at recruitment, hopefully. But yeah, starting with that. So start small, start simple. There doesn't have to be, and ours are reasonably glamorous because, as I said, we've got amazing partners that support them. They don't have to be, we do one event, which is pretty low key. We do, what's it called? It's called Brexmas. Sounds like Brexit. So I didn't come up with a name, where it's like, is breakfast for recruitment. Yeah. Within recruitment, so yeah. And then Brexmas was the Christmas version of it. We did in the evening at that same community where we just literally, I think one of our partners put some money behind the bar, and we invited 40 to 50 CFOs and FDs, and they just turned up and had a drink. And it was not inexpensive. It was not glamorous, but they were out drinking till whatever time they were, and had some really good quality conversations, and some really great ROI came from that. So start small. Sometimes it's social. People want to meet each other. Gone are the days where everyone's sort of, from a competitive standpoint, don't want to talk to each other. Common sharing, common learning, whether it's tech or new innovations, or whether it's new legislation or whatever it might be. People want to talk to each other. So it's understanding what your clients want and adapting accordingly.
How much tribal knowledge is getting lost in your business every single day? Your recruiters are having conversations with clients and candidates that contain valuable intelligence, salary expectations, relocation preferences, company expansions, hiring plans. But if you're lucky, they write 3 lines of notes after the call. Most of the information disappears forever. Recruiter Flow is an AI-first ATS and CRM with built-in note-taking that captures those conversations, transcribes them, and automatically structures the data into your system. Now you can search across months of conversations, synthesize insights before client meetings, and actually leverage all of that knowledge your team is gathering. Several of our Recruitment Coach clients are using this feature, and the results speak for themselves. To learn more, book a demo at recruitmentcoach.com/recruiterflow. So we teach in our coaching program a strategy called Dream 100, which basically means like you identify your highest value target clients, key accounts, let's say, and you need to think of a more creative way of approaching them to try and get conversations with them. And the vehicle is called the Superior Access Strategy. And the event that you've just described, the event strategy, is brilliant because instead of calling and saying, are you hiring? Can we help? Do you have any jobs? You're actually inviting them to something that they want to go to, right? So it changes the dynamic completely, is that you've got something quite exclusive and valuable, and you're inviting them to come along as the start to a relationship is powerful. Are there any mistakes or things you've learned along the way that might save somebody time or money doing the wrong thing?
I think it's okay to experiment. If you're being sort of sensible, measured with the cost that that you're putting into something. But I think don't kind of align what I said earlier. Just don't presume what your clients want to hear, and don't go lavish venues and things like that. I said genuinely, just ask them. I think saving sort of time and money on something that someone's not going to turn up to. I think giving too short notice to people. I think that doesn't help. I think also making sure dropouts, right? You account for dropouts. That's a big thing I do reasonably well. Where my expectation is that and sometimes I hope that I'm not let down as much, but I always end up having some people drop out. So I'll always try and invite 25, 30% more people than I would expect to. Worst case scenario, you've got too many people there. But that, I tend to get the numbers right from that. And I think that sets it up for success. The worst thing is you run an event and no one turns up because of letdowns, or a small group turn up. It's hard. It's hard initially. Yeah.
That's a good guideline. So invite 25% more people than you have spaces for, and then you'll probably get the turnout that you're aiming for. So tell me about insight-led BD. Then, how does that work?
Yeah, again, it's very much our business development is around. Again, we've got the events piece and the community piece, but then we produce incredible content. Sadly, I'm not in one of my offices right now, or one of my meeting rooms, so I could have shown you it. But we produce something called the Global Report for our private equity clients, the holdcos and the portcos, and it's our 5th one that we've released. If you just Google Camino search and then Global Report, and then whichever number you want to look at, it's about that thick. It's about 120 pages, all produced in-house. We have one external contributor who's an economist that will contribute, or a financial writer will contribute a page to. But beyond that, we just go to our clients. Again, another reason to talk to people, get amazing contributors. We had the ex-CEO of Iris, headlining one of the issues. We've just had amazing people talk about everything from AI and disrupting the world of AI or disrupting the world of tech. Through to M&A, what investors are looking for. We've just these incredible reports. And from an insight perspective, if I call you as a prospect and say, hey, look, I've got this to share with you, or would you like to contribute to our next one, because we're getting reasonably well known for them, would you like to contribute to the next one? It's just so compelling. And that person also just happens to be an amazing stakeholder for us and a prospect for us, but you don't go and you don't lead with that. It's kind of, in my mind, 101. But we do a lot of work around insights that we've got from the report, saying, look, we'll say, do you want to contribute to the next one, or what would you like to see in the next one? Or actually, can I drop a copy to you that's just been released, and can we have a meeting to talk through? And people now ask for these in advance. As soon as they're coming out, they just want to grab at them. And we've got soft and hard copies, and they're really powerful. So we do that. We produce salary surveys for the recruitment sector, so up to date, what people's mission control teams should be being paid at each level. And look, there's a lot more we could do, but the insight piece is around telling people stuff that that they're interested in, and beyond that, the 101 stuff is just staying close to our clients and candidates, understanding what they're learning, and telling other clients and candidates, obviously with confidence, respected, things that they don't know or want to hear.
I'd love to break that down a little bit further. So, hopefully what people are getting when they listen to this, Sachin, is the production of your global report. There's multiple touch points baked into that, right? Because there's reaching out to people and inviting them to contribute, right? So that even before you've created it, you're communicating and building relationships with your clients and potential clients. Then there's after you've produced it, then you're able to send it to people, which is adding value and then sparking conversations. So it's like, it's not just creating a lead magnet or a report. It unlocks multiple reasons to talk to folks, right? So that's smart. But then how at this sort of, so you're obviously doing that as a business, and you, if we have time, we'll talk about your marketing department, but how do at a recruitment consultant level, how do people leverage that in order to, have really effective business development calls, for example?
Effectively, we train them. So our marketing function will, talk them through kind of go to market, and there'll be some of the senior leaders that will talk them through kind of, how we take these things to market, whether it's the events, talk about the events, or whether it's the insight piece. There is a risk, by the way, if you're too focused on the insight itself or on the event, and actually don't even ask. I mean, I said, hopefully, you will translate that conversation. But getting a meeting with them, I think, is first and foremost. You don't want to, there's the element of Trojan horse, but I also don't like being disingenuous. So I think I would, if I've had a good conversation with someone about an insight or about an article or an event, then I will then say, look, I'd love to catch up. It's been a long time since we caught up, or I'd love to share more about perhaps some of the other work that your competitors are doing, without, again, betraying confidences, or what we're seeing in the market, and share some insights. And that, and then naturally, I always am straight up said, and naturally our business does this. We'd love to see how we can support you as a partner going forward. And so, if the guys and girls in the business are having those conversations, then all of a sudden, you're using the insight or the event or whatever it might be to talk with somebody. You're giving them something rather than asking for something. And then, when you give them something, they obviously want to give you something back, or hopefully want to give you something back. And having a meeting or a further conversation, video call, wherever it might be, that will then be the warm up to then, hopefully telling more about what we do and ultimately getting business from them.
I think that's smart, Sachin. Like, we can't forget the commercial reason behind the insight or the event. And in fact, so we've helped, I don't know, probably a dozen or so recruitment businesses now to launch a podcast. But it's remembering, okay, like inviting someone to be a guest on your podcast is great, but are you circling back and then talking about business, right? And actually leveraging it as a vehicle for, driving more revenue. So, because you can go too far the other way and get carried away with the marketing and content and insight, and forget to link it back to your core business as well. What I'd love to understand is like the sort of, you mentioned structure as one of the key factors. How is your business structured in terms of like, is it 360? Is it split desk with sales and recruiting? What does that look like at Camino?
Largely 360. And I think there's an evolution needed, and we're kind of moving to that. We're moving. We haven't announced it formally to the market, but why not? We're creating a bit more of an origination function within our business, within the Camino Search brand, where people that love selling. I mean, if we think about it, I'd be happy to challenge on this, but delivery and sourcing CVs and building communities of candidates, pools of candidates, and matching them with roles is different. It's a very different skill set from going to market and having conversations with people you don't know and trying to open doors. And so there's, it's quite, again, obvious what I'm saying here, but I do think there's work to be done, and we're slowly moving in that direction. I think it is slow because there are people that enjoy that full 360 element, and there's some that don't. Do we want to be in a business where we lose people because they're exceptional? They're exceptional on the delivery side, but not strong on business development. We might realize that later. We've got one delivery person in the US, which is kind of an embryonic. It wasn't the intention. We realized quite quickly this lady didn't like the whole business development element, and because we valued her and because she was really strong on delivering at right through to CEO level mandates, and we created a role for her. The only thing is you've got to make sure there's enough food to feed people if you've got a function that's delivery oriented. That's the only slight challenge. Yes. And then the UK, we deliberately put on someone for the board practice that we have, who's a researcher and kind of does a lot more than that. I want to give him credit with that, but really talented guy that just knows the market so well, and his focal point is candidate sourcing. So we're largely 360. The new kind of origination team, we've got really 4 guys that are just going to be very, very focused on going to market and developing relationships and feeding the rest of the business, which might thereby create more of a delivery function. But in the short to medium term, those people are also going to go to market and create opportunity. It's not a bad thing to either to have too much opportunity, because then you either choose and you're selective about what you work on, or you then have the impetus to bring on more people to deliver for you.
Makes total sense. And I agree with your rationale there. So thinking about this sort of stages in your journey, Sachin, where you've kind of got to the point now where you have like learning and development, obviously, is well established. You've got marketing and so on. But there's this kind of awkward stage where maybe you're, say, 10 people plus. Often the owner is still billing, and you don't really have like anyone who's dedicated to L&D. You don't have anyone dedicated to internal recruitment. You don't have a marketing person. What was that evolution like for you? Like, at what points did you invest in having those resources in order to be able to scale faster?
It's a really, really good question, and it's a difficult one to answer. I suppose there's 2 questions there, really. One, perhaps what I would have done with hindsight and what I actually did. Part of it was learning along the way. The biggest one for me was, and I actually met 2 great founders, young founders, the business up in January. They're doing really well. And I was talking to them, and we're having a similar conversation. They've grown from 2 to 5, since January, which is just great. From a headcount perspective, don't invest in people just because you feel you need someone. If you're looking at, I said, use your phone. Both of you have a shared place where you put your notes. What could you be doing? What are you doing? If there's a task you're doing, what could you avoid doing that would then mean if someone else did it, how much, from an opportunity cost perspective, is there someone else that could do this, that wouldn't necessarily be you? And you start creating a joint list with the other founder. And before you know it, when you've created enough of a job spec in that, inadvertently you've created a job spec there, at that point you should be hiring someone, because from an opportunity cost perspective, if you pay whatever you pay for an ops person to do all this, the difficult stuff that's low hanging, but will allow you to be more effective at building the business, whether it's delivering on mandates or hiring people or going to market and doing business development. I think that's something to look at as your first hire potentially. Use fractional services in the short term is my advice. Use excellent, and if ever anyone needs, I'm always really giving with my time. I can introduce people to accountants that are recruitment sector specific, or learning development professionals that have set up a portfolio career where they come in and deliver for academies and do all of it. And it's not cheap, but you don't have to have a permanent resource dealing with that. And then I think as your business grows, it's all depends on how capital intensive your business is as to how quickly you might grow out, for example, your finance function. And 2, it's also around what your ambition is, because if you want to be 15 people forever, that would be very different in terms of the needs of the business from a mission control perspective versus, you want to get from 15 to 50 over 3 years. It's a different narrative. So setting milestones, dependent on whether you're a contractor driven business, you probably need an accountant in-house sooner because it's more capital intensive. If you're international, there's nuances to recruitment. Many. If you're a complex, more sort of consultancy, statement of work type recruitment business, then you again may need to have bid writers and people like that potentially outsourced, but then you bring someone in-house because it's a lot of it that you're doing going to market. So my advice would be, it's all very different or dependent on the nature of the business. Our journey was I made some really great decisions and some less so, but generally, we've over-invested in our mission control team, partly because it would be ironic if I didn't, given Camino partners' focus, but also I believe truly that they're the unsung heroes of recruitment, and the true sales enablers will allow them and the business to be very, very effective if they're operating, if they're good and they're operating well.
That's a really Good point. I should have asked you from that lens in the first place, since that is literally the market that you serve, which is the non-billing roles within a recruitment business that's growing. What I guess there's a couple ways of looking at it. First of all, what are some mistakes that you see founders or CEOs making? And then, like, what would you say are I know you're saying it depends on the ambitions and the goals. So let's just assume that they really want to scale and get as big as they can. Like, what is the order that they should be adding people? Like, is it ops, then finance, then marketing, or like what's your recommended priority in terms of where they make those hires?
Yeah, I don't think it's a one size fits all, but I do think that there's certain areas that are critical. Marketing, this day and age, people, there's a blend of recruitment and marketing, and being able to take yourself to market, I think is really powerful. So I think it's hard to give you numbers, but in the short term, you could bring in someone who's kind of a Swiss Army knife, for want of a better phrase, that can work across your functions, whether it's invoicing and credit control, which aren't rocket science. We've had someone that's done this, in an earlier iteration of our business, and do sort of some marketing, social media, whatever it is. Run assessment days. You can find great ops managers. So my first hire within a business, 20 people odd, 15 to 20 people, would be bringing in an ops manager, head of operations, that has a number of hats they wear. Technology, there's quite a few of them. You're not going to have necessary expertise in all those areas. And as your business gets bigger, that person might specialize, or they might move on. And then you bring specialists, as we've done, across all our different verticals, so marketing, ops, L&D, etc.
That makes sense. Yeah, great first hire. And I suppose it circles back to one of the points you made earlier, which is hiring people with complementary skills, experience, and so on, because typically what I see is not always, but typically the owner, the CEO of a recruitment business is great at sales, doing deals, networking, building relationships. The ops side is usually their weakness. And so hiring someone who's really strong on that side and is a good all-rounder, I suppose, for that stage of business, and they can help out with marketing, they can help out with finance, they can, put systems, processes in place, they can, get the CRM implemented and all that stuff. Is that kind of what you're thinking, or?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think, there's an analogy that I'll give you, which someone told me about a long time ago. I never forgot it. It's called your A's, B's, and F's. So just bear with me. But the focus should be, in my opinion, on focusing on your skills or experience, whatever it might be. Get on your A to an A star or your B to an A. Don't mess around with the F's, because you might get from an F to an E or maybe even a D. You're still probably not going to be that great at it. So for me, that might be, I don't know, marketing personally. I just know people that are good. So I brought in a marketing director who's exceptional. So my view would be always surrounding yourself with people that are able to service and support the development areas that you have.
I love that. That makes total sense. So actually breaking down your role into the skills required or your business, and thinking and giving yourself a grade like A, B plus, C, F, and don't try and improve on your weaknesses. Focus on doubling down on your strengths, and then hire people who are A's and B pluses in the areas that you lack. Am I understanding correctly?
Exactly right. Yeah,
Fantastic.
Exactly. That's where that's how I feel about. Then it's not saying it's an exact science, but I'm pretty. I think you have to be self-aware is really, really important. That's a really important caveat to what I've just said, because if you think you're a B when actually you're an F, then you've got a problem, right? But
right.
You have to be self-aware, and you have to take other people's views as well. Ask them, where they think you're at, and where. If you're not aware of, do you think that was any good? And I suppose you can then evaluate what good looks like.
Fantastic. Sachin, just before you go, are you guys still expanding? Like, what's your vision going forward?
Yeah, I haven't rolled it out officially to the business, but I started testing the water. But yeah, there's a couple of key things we're looking to do, right? So what I'm relaunching internally, formally quite soon, is something called Mission 234. And mission control. We want to double our headcount and treble our net fee income. in 4 years. So 2, 3, 4.
Love
so
it.
that's kind of the plan. And I think it rolls off the tongue. It's pretty easy and it's quite powerful, compelling, I think. And that will probably mean that we need to add over the next 4 years, really 1 net hire a year, roughly over the next 3 to 4 years. And that will then get us to where we need to from a headcount perspective. But what you'll learn about
one
me is
net hire per year?
A month, sorry, as
month,
I said.
per
Sorry.
month. Got it.
Sorry, that would be terrible. You have to have a very high-performing business to do that. I'm sorry. 1 net hire per month for the next 3 to 4 years. Apologies. And that would then allow you to allow us to get to where I want to from a headcount perspective. But one thing you'll learn about me is that I'm not ego-driven. We are, the whole business is very low ego in terms of our culture. And so it's not a vanity number. I want to get to a really big size. It's, well, actually, how productive are you? Right. What does that convert to in terms of net sort of turnover to net fee income to EBIT? All those are really critical in your journey, and to not lose sight of both the top line, but also the bottom line as well. Because if you're going to, depending on what your ambitions are, if you want to create a story for an investor or a private equity house or a trade buyer, you're going to need to have consistency there. So yeah, we want to scale, and we're strategically hiring at the moment. I've got 2 or 3 key mandates that we're looking to fill, including a US MD hire, and several others that are really critical within our business at the moment. And then really it's once I've built that leadership bandwidth, which is one thing I really need to broach to allow future scalability, we'll be able to put our foot down and add some more heads the next year or so.
That sounds exciting. Awesome. Sachin, thank you so much. Really enjoyed that conversation. I think there was a lot of insight for founders who are scaling, but also just the mindset, mental health, and personal development aspect, I think will make this episode extremely valuable for all our listeners. So Sachin, I really appreciate you. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
What a generous conversation with Sachin. He was so open about how he actually scaled Camino. And the 2 things that really struck me, one was I loved his approach to business development. He called it the art of selling without selling. So instead of ringing a prospect to ask if they're hiring, Sachin invites them to something they actually want to attend, an event, a CFO dinner, a coffee, and the hiring plans come out naturally. Second, I really loved his concept around A's, B's, and F's for hiring, and how he grades himself honestly on the skills the business needs and pushes his A's to A stars and B's to A's. But he doesn't waste energy dragging an F up to a D because you'll never be great. Marketing was his weak spot, so instead he brought in a marketing director who's exceptional. What stood out the most for you in this one? Let me know your biggest takeaway on LinkedIn or in the YouTube comments. And more importantly, what are the 1 or 2 things that you're going to put in practice this week? If you're getting value from these conversations, do me a favor and hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. I really appreciate you listening. Make it a great day, and I'll see you next time.